Okay, here's our update on uranium here, August 24th. We did our last video update yesterday. We talked about how there was a daily cycle low likely given the swing low here, and now we're getting massive follow through. We talked about how we were below the 10-period moving average, and we've obviously just kind of gapped above it. Now, that said, we did gap up yesterday, and I was expecting us to fill that gap, and now we've just opened up, a sort of ginormous gap, which probably gets filled at some point in the future. Doesn't have to be soon, but that's something to be aware of. That's about just about exactly $1 gap from 23.76 to 24.70. That said, we're on day 2 of a new daily cycle. We're already above the high from the last daily cycle. That was day 26. And now we're going to try to test this level here, like this last high, which is around, in that 28 area, which is going to coincide with your sort of monthly chart. I'll erase that for now. So very important on the weekly. We talked about this in the last update. This is a really, really important pattern to understand. It's my go-to. And again, it's the same thing that you'll hear called a false breakdown. You'll hear other people call it, the strat calls it an outside candle, right? In this case, bullish because it's green. We made a new low. This is a weekly candle. We made a new low, and then we went green, right? So this started red because we had made a low. We gapped down. And then we started to fill that gap. Went green. And the expectation was that we would make a new high above this weekly candle by the end of the week, right? Like, we obviously just did that today, Wednesday, and we still have 2 trading days to go, which is why I would expect there's probably going to be consolidation from here. But who knows? We may just gap up again tomorrow. And just to take a step back, there was news that Japan is going to restart, using nuclear power plants. They're going to reopen some decommissioned ones and basically start planning for new age technologies for some new ones. And so that's fundamental news. That said, we had our swing low before that fundamental news came, right? That news came last night, which is what caused this gap. So this is never about predicting. It's about watching the price action, taking advantage of the probabilities, and generally that's going to put things in your favor. This kind of news you'll be able to capture if you're following the bullish price action. And so what that means about this weekly cycle, right, is that, this would technically be week 15. This could be one of those triangle consolidations, right, where this ends up being your weekly cycle low, even though it's obviously higher than these lows here. We'll just have to see how this kind of plays out. And again, this high from week 4 is your same high from that $28 high, which we'll talk about is important on the monthly chart. We need to get above this level, ideally back test it from above, right? So like something like, this back test and then keep moving higher, right? That's what we would need to see to feel kind of confident that we're moving in the right direction. And so if we look at the monthly chart, this is the big question. Did we make a long-term cycle top, right, on month 25? Look at this beautiful candle. What does this give us? A new high on the monthly chart. If we can get above 28, that gets us out of this this congestion zone. Like, look at that. You have a high here, a high here, a high here. If you can get above this line, like this area, that gets you above these 3 highs. That gets you above that. So think about that. What does that mean? It means you're making a new high on the monthly chart above a consolidation zone. So at this point, you have to imagine we're going to hit 28 by this week. If not tomorrow, then maybe it's Friday. What happens when we get there is the question, right? Do we blast through it and then backtest from above? Do we hit it and then drop and then continue to consolidate below it? Either of those would be bullish scenarios. What we don't want to see is hitting the 28 and then getting a massive rejection, let's say $1, like, 50 cents, something like a really big upper wick sort of form. And so that's what we're going to be watching for. This is obviously incredibly bullish, and, there's quote unquote fundamental news that guides it. And that's why anyone that tells you fundamental news doesn't matter isn't paying attention. Obviously it matters, right? Like, that's what's going to change the numbers, the revenue. The price action is meant for us to understand how people are reacting to that news, right? if you can understand the reactions, it doesn't even matter what the news is. But I would say knowing what the news is can be helpful additional information. Like, it's helpful to know that you have that wind at your back. And if we're looking at these other uranium names, so this is CCJ again, which is what we're looking at. This is your ETF. That's GoVX, Fission Uranium, Paladin, NextGen, UEC, Denison. They all have the same pattern. These are weekly charts. Notice they all made that lower low before, and now they made a higher high. And so they've reached their targets. Got to be careful here. This is where I know we get excited. This could be the start of a new leg up. And what we need to confirm is that the long-term cycle top is not in, or maybe what actually just happened, if we really think about it, right? Let's go to the monthly charts. Let's look at what these guys look like. See, all these monthly charts are starting to look more bullish. Does it mean that maybe this is our long-term cycle low, right? Like, did we make that already? Again, these are all things we're going to be watching for. And you don't have to get emotional about it. You can just watch the price action. I will say Denison is probably one of the more bearish looking ones. I mean, look at the number of swing highs it's below, like, right? That said, it's still having that positive reaction like everyone else. I mean, this is a really bullish hammer-like monthly candle. So you have to take that for what it is. So day 2 of a new daily cycle, even if it's going to be a bearish cycle, that means we could still have a rally for another 5-6 trading days. Doesn't mean it happens in a straight line. We may get a pullback along that way, but this is definitely something to trade. You can see all of them did the same thing, right? Big gap up, big, beautiful green candle. Again, at some point, that gap probably does get filled. That's something to be aware of. But for now, the stop should be pretty clear. I would, you could set a stop below the low of this gap, right? Because if we break that low, we're probably going to the other end of the gap, and it's going to be a question, do we stop at that end? So Fission is interesting. It didn't actually gap up. That's nice. So that's nice and clean. And that's a beautiful sort of clean candle. So that could be an interesting one. What does the monthly look like on that one? Yeah, same kind of deal. That's interesting. So that's the picture on uranium. Very exciting news, obviously. But I would say manage the emotions, follow the levels.